6 months. It's hard to believe. How did the time pass so quickly? Wow. It feels like just yesterday that I walked into this room for the very first time. And today, it's time to leave this room behind and move somewhere new. For these past 6 months, I've been living at John Lester and Eddie Coleman Courts, my university affiliated student accommodation. And honestly, so many memories became attached to this place during these 6 months, especially this view. My room was on the 13th floor, and to me, this window was never just a window. It was my entertainment. No work, no plans, nowhere to go. There were so many times when I would simply sit by this window without really thinking about anything. I would watch the view outside, watch people going about their lives, look up at the sky, and just like that, hours would pass. Maybe for the first time in my life, I spent this much time completely on my own. But strangely enough, at some point, I started to enjoy that loneliness. Even today, when I close my eyes, I can still remember my first days in Manchester so clearly. When I first landed in Manchester, it was absolutely freezing. It was snowing, which honestly doesn't happen that often in the UK. The streets were covered in snow. Everything around me looked almost completely white. And meanwhile, my hands and even the tip of my nose were practically freezing off. Because I was used to the weather back home in Bangladesh. Going directly from the heat of Bangladesh to the freezing cold of Manchester was a completely new experience for me. I honestly felt like my hands were no longer part of my body. They were basically frozen meat. But jokes aside, the truth is, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing back then. Where to go, how to get around, how to find a job, how to adapt to this completely new environment. Everything was unfamiliar. Then came another struggle, job hunting. I was unemployed, I had a decent CV, a resume. But what difference did that make? Just because your CV is good doesn't mean jobs in the UK come knocking on your door. Getting a job was nowhere near as easy as I had imagined. I tried one place after another, applied, waited, tried again, and then waited again. But getting a response, that was a whole different challenge. And gradually, I started to understand something. References can make a huge difference here. You meet someone, you become friends, they refer you to their workplace, you get the job. Then you gradually learn the work, gain experience, and maybe, eventually, even get promoted. And that's how, little by little, you start building a network. And in my case, that's how a few doors gradually started opening for me too. And alongside all of that, there was another huge pressure: tuition fees. Every month, I had an installment of around £1,600. I mean, each installment felt like a small mountain. If I couldn't make the payment on time, a warning would come from the university. And every time I saw one of those warnings, there was only one thought running through my head: where am I going to get this money from? I really learned the hard way what student life abroad can actually do to you. There's so much pressure behind it. Paying for your own expenses, paying rent, food, finding the energy to cook, transport costs, and on top of all that, as if all of that wasn't enough, tuition fees. So having a side hustle or a part-time job isn't really an option, it's a necessity, especially if you don't come from a wealthy family. But out of everything I experienced during these 6 months, there was one thing I enjoyed the most: having time to myself. At that point, I basically had one main job, working at the Every warehouse. I still go there from time to time. And the rest of my time, I spent however I wanted. Sometimes I would go outside, hang out with my best friend from the flat downstairs, watch a movie for free once a month. Sometimes I would just stay in my room, and quite often, I would do absolutely nothing, just look at the city through this window on the 13th floor. sometimes during the daylight, sometimes under the evening sky, sometimes looking at the city at night, and that unfamiliar city on the other side of the window slowly became a very familiar part of my life. And now, as I'm leaving this room, it feels like I'm not just changing an address, I'm leaving behind a quiet chapter of my life. 6 months isn't a very long time, and yet, sometimes even a short period of time is enough to change a person completely. The person who first walked into this room 6 months ago was uncertain about this unfamiliar city, full of doubts and countless questions. Even today, I probably haven't found the answers to all of them. The uncertainty hasn't completely disappeared either. It's just that I've learned how to live my life comfortably, even in the middle of uncertainty. These 6 months taught me something. There are some lessons in life that nobody can teach you by holding your hand. Some lessons come from spending long hours alone in a quiet room. Some come from trying again after failure. Some come from looking at numbers that simply don't add up at the end of the month. And some lessons come from moments when, in the end, the only person you find standing beside you is yourself. Maybe that's how people change. Not through one huge life changing event, but through the small struggles of everyday life, waiting, uncertainty, and quietly accepting the realities you cannot change. So today, as I'm leaving this room, it feels like I'm not just taking some memories with me, I'm also leaving an older version of myself right here. But the story doesn't end here, because as my 6 month accommodation journey comes to an end, a whole new struggle has just been unlocked, and that is finding a new place to live. Where am I going? How much will the rent be? Who am I going to live with? How far will it be from work? How far from the university? I have to think about everything all over again, and the entire journey, how I found a new place, what problems I faced, how much money I spent, and finally, where I ended up living. That story will be in my next vlog. Until then, take care of yourselves, and if you're enjoying this journey, stay with me, because my story in Manchester is far from over. See you in the next vlog.